Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at some really powerful principles of effectiveness. Ideas that have genuinely shifted how millions think about life and work.
That's right. Our source material comes from excerpts of a very widely read book focusing on habits and effectiveness, really.
And our mission, as always, is to pull out those key insights.
Yeah.
The real nuggets that can give you a shortcut to understanding these ideas and maybe seeing how they fit for you.
Yeah, and these sources, they tap into something a lot of people feel. You achieve some outward success, hit goals, look good on paper, but inside there's still this, inner hunger, or maybe struggles with important relationships.
Right, the feeling of disconnect.
Exactly. And the core idea we're exploring is that just focusing on the external stuff, the quick fixes, it's often not enough. This is more about a discipline for, integrating everything, personal life, family, work. Building effectiveness from the inside out.
That really hits home.
Yeah.
It's so easy to chase the markers, the status, but if that inner foundation isn't solid, it just feels, hollow sometimes. So this isn't just another business strategy guide then. It's more like a blueprint for personal change.
Precisely. It's really about fundamental character and how that shapes everything else. And the sources, they make this really clear distinction early on. They talk about the personality ethic versus the character ethic.
Okay.
So for the first maybe 150 years of the American success literature they looked at, the focus was squarely on character. Things like, integrity, humility, courage, justice.
The real foundations.
Yeah.
Who you are.
That's it. That was seen as the root of success. But then particularly after World War I, there seemed to be this shift towards the personality ethic.
And that's more like what we see a lot of today.
Very much so. It's the techniques, the communication skills, positive attitude, sometimes even, ways to manipulate people through PR or certain behaviors, how to appear.
The power look, or those little tricks to influence people, even if maybe you don't genuinely connect.
You're right. The sources actually called this stuff social aspirin and Band-Aids.
Yeah.
They might give you a quick fix, some relief short term, but they don't actually fix the underlying chronic condition. It's like trying to cram for a huge exam overnight versus really putting in the work to understand the subject.
You might scrape by, but you haven't really learned anything lasting.
Exactly. You haven't built an educated mind, just passed a test.
There's that great analogy the source uses here. Trying to cram on a farm. Can you even imagine that?
Yeah, right.
Skipping the planting, the cultivating, all spring and summer, then showing up in the fall expecting to, cram a harvest into existence.
It's absurd when you put it like that, isn't it? A farm is a natural system. You just have to follow the process. You have to pay the price. You always, always reap what you sow. No shortcuts.
And the point they're making is that's just as true for us, for human behavior, relationships, effectiveness.
That's the core insight they really hammer home. It's a natural law, just like on the farm. You can't fake the process long term. Character, that's the harvest you cultivate over time.
So the character ethic is about, building that internal farm, doing the real work. Okay. And that seems to lead right into this really powerful idea of paradigms. They spend a lot of time on this.
They do, yeah, because it's absolutely foundational. A paradigm. It comes from the Greek. It's basically just a model, a theory, a perception, an assumption. Your frame of reference.
How we see the world.
Exactly. Not just literally seeing, but how we understand it, how we interpret everything around us.
Like having a map in your head. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a perfect analogy. We all have these mental maps. We have maps of the way things are our realities and maps of how things should be our values.
And we just use them.
Yeah.
Without really thinking about it.
Usually, yeah. We interpret everything through these maps, mostly unaware we're even doing it. We just assume our map is the actual place, the territory itself.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. The source uses that classic drawing, the one that can look like a young woman or an old woman, depending on how you look.
Ah, yes, that's a brilliant illustration.
And because you look at it, you see one version, maybe really clearly. And then someone else looks at the exact same lines, the same spaces, and they see the other image. And it can be incredibly hard to even grasp what they're seeing.
It really can. It shows perfectly how people can look at the identical information, the identical input, and interpret it completely differently. Why? Because of their conditioning, their past experiences, their paradigm.
Their map.
Their map. And the key takeaway here is, often when we disagree strongly with someone, our first instinct is, what's wrong with them?
Guilty, yeah.
But often it's just that two reasonable, clear-headed people are seeing the same thing through fundamentally different lenses, different maps.
There's that quote, We see the world not as it is, but as we are. That really sticks.
It does. So the implication is huge. If we want significant change, like really fundamental quantum change, it's not enough to just tweak our attitude or behavior. That's like hacking at the leaves on a tree.
You need to go deeper.
You have to work on the basic paradigms. You have to strike at the root.
That's the power of a paradigm shift.
Man.
Got it. And these paradigms, you're saying, they're shaped by, or maybe should be shaped by, fundamental principles.
Exactly. The sources argue pretty strongly that there are these underlying principles that govern human effectiveness. They're like natural laws, like gravity in the physical world. They're just there, unchanging, woven into how things actually work in relationships and organizations everywhere.
So our maps, our paradigms, those are subjective takes on the world.
Right.
But the principles, those are the objective reality, like the lighthouses the sources mention. They just are.
Yes, precisely. And the closer our paradigms, our maps, align with those objective principles, the more accurate our maps become, and frankly, the more effective we'll be. Just changing attitudes or behaviors without shifting the underlying map, it's ultimately ineffective. Or, temporary at best.
This feels like it circles right back to that personality ethic versus character ethic thing. The personality ethic seems like trying to change behavior without addressing the map.
You nailed it. It's often symbol without substance, trying to look good without being good, fundamentally.
Right.
And that whole quick fix approach, it often misunderstands how growth actually happens. The sources lay out this really useful framework called the maturity continuum.
Right.
It describes the journey from dependence, moving through independence, and ultimately aiming for interdependence.
Dependence.
Dude.
That sounds like childhood, right? You take care of me, you do it for me. The you paradigm.
That's the one. Then comes independence. That's often the teenager young adult shift. I can do it myself. I'm responsible for me. The I paradigm.
And that's important. It's a vital step, being self-reliant.
Absolutely crucial. Independent thinking empowers you. It frees you from just being a product of circumstances or what other people dictate. It's a necessary, liberating goal to achieve.
But you're saying that's not the end goal. For maximum effectiveness, why not?
Well, think about it. Life itself, especially complex life with families, teams, communities, it's fundamentally interdependent. Trying to be supremely effective, relying only on your independence. It's like trying to play tennis with a golf club.
Okay. The tool doesn't fit the game.
Exactly. You need cooperation, you need synergy, you need to leverage the strengths of others. Independence alone isn't suited for the reality of most of our important goals.
So interdependence is the next stage. That's the we paradigm. We can do it. We can cooperate.
Yes. It's seen as more mature, more advanced. Physically, it's knowing that working together can achieve way more than working alone. Emotionally, it's, having your own sense of worth, but also valuing connection, giving and receiving love. Intellectually, it's recognizing you need and value the best thinking of others, not just your own brilliant ideas.
And here's a really key point they make. Interdependence is a choice that only independent people can truly make.
That's critical. Dependent people, they lack the character, that core self-mastery, to genuinely choose cooperation from a place of strength. They might try to be interdependent, but it often comes from neediness, not from a full cup.
Which explains why the first 3 habits the sources outline are all about mastering yourself, moving from dependence to independence.
Right, they call those the private victories. You absolutely have to build that internal strength, that character foundation, before you can have truly effective, healthy, interdependent relationships, which is where the public victories come in.
That makes so much sense. You can't build a healthy we if the I is still shaky or needy. It's that inside-out idea again. Start with yourself.
And closely related to this, another really fundamental concept for effectiveness is what the sources call the PPC balance.
PPC balance. Okay, what's that?
So P stands for production. That's the desired results, the output. Think golden eggs. PC stands for production capability. That's the asset, the resource, the ability that produces those results. Think the goose that lays the golden eggs.
The goose and the golden eggs.
Right.
And true effectiveness is about balancing those two.
Exactly. It's a balance. If you focus only on getting the eggs and you neglect the goose, PC, you push the asset too hard, don't maintain it, don't care for it eventually, what happens?
No more goose, no more eggs.
Right. You lose the asset that produces. But on the flip side, if you only care for the goose, PC, pamper it, but don't actually aim for any production. You won't have any eggs to feed yourself or even keep the goose going.
So you need both. Results and the ability to keep getting results.
You need the balance. And this applies everywhere. Think financially.
Okay.
Your ability to earn your skills, your health, your reputation, that's your greatest financial asset, your PC. If you neglect investing in yourself, your future production, P is limited.
Makes sense.
And the sources argue this balance is maybe even more critical in relationships.
How so?
Well, if people in relationships, spouses, parents, colleagues, if they focus only on getting the golden eggs, the immediate benefits, the tasks done, getting compliance right now, and they neglect the relationship itself, the trust, the understanding, the connection, which is the goose, the PC, the asset that produces goodwill and cooperation. What happens? They become insensitive, demanding, maybe manipulative.
Like wanting your kid to have a clean room. That's the production, the P.
Right.
The kid is the goose, the PC. So nagging and yelling might get the room clean this time.
Maybe.
Wow.
Short-term production.
But it damages the relationship, the PC.
Yeah.
Makes future cooperation much less likely, or at least less cheerful.
Precisely. The sources share a really touching personal story about this. A father was pushing his young daughter to share her toys at a park. He kind of, borrowed strength from his size and authority, forced her compliance.
Got the egg this year.
Got the egg. But he realized later he had made a huge withdrawal from the relationship account. He damaged the asset, the trust. He learned that building the relationship first, teaching privately when things were calm and trust was high, that was the truly effective, the PC-focused approach.
Wow. That really lands. Short-term gain, long-term damage to the capability. And you see this in organizations too, don't you? Pushing people or equipment for immediate results without maintaining them.
All the time. The manager laser focused on this quarter's numbers, who burns out their team or runs equipment into the ground without maintenance. They're neglecting PC. They might look good, get promoted even.
Right.
But they leave behind a depleted asset for whoever comes next. It's not sustainable effectiveness.
Okay, so this foundation is crucial. Character ethic over personality ethic, understanding our paradigms, moving along the maturity continuum, and maintaining that PPC balance. With that in place, we can really dig into the habits themselves, starting with those private victories moving us to independence.
Exactly. And the very first habit is be proactive, foundational.
Be proactive. What's the core idea there?
The absolute key insight is this. Between stimulus, whatever happens to you, and response, how you react, human beings have the freedom to choose.
That space.
That space. And it's possible because of our unique human endowments: self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will. Animals don't really have that space in the same way.
Right. You mentioned Viktor Frankl earlier. In a Nazi death camp, of all places. He observed this, didn't he?
One of the most profound examples ever. Stripped of literally everything else, he realized they couldn't take away his fundamental identity, his freedom to choose his attitude, his response to those horrific circumstances. That was still his.
That last of the human freedoms.
And it's fueled by those endowments. Self-awareness lets us step back and look at our own thoughts, our programming, our scripts. Imagination lets us envision possibilities beyond our immediate reality. Conscience connects us to deeper principles and values. And independent will is our power to act based on that self-awareness, not just on instinct or conditioning.
So, if we feel like our lives are just sort of determined by our upbringing or what's happening around us, it's because, maybe unconsciously, we've chosen to let those things control our response.
Essentially, yes. That makes us reactive. Reactive people are driven by feelings, by circumstances, by the social weather, by what other people do or say. They tend to build their emotional lives around the behavior of others. If people treat them well, they feel good. If not, they feel bad. They often feel victimized, out of control.
And you can hear it in the language, right? That's just the way I am. He makes me so mad. There's nothing I can do. It's all pushing responsibility outwards.
Exactly. Whereas proactive people, they're driven by values. Values they've consciously thought about, reflected on, and chosen. The absolute essence of proactivity is subordinating an impulse to a value.
Okay, say more about that. Subordinating impulse to value.
It means you choose your response based on what you've decided is important, on your principles, not just on the immediate feeling or urge or external pressure of the moment. You act. You don't just get acted upon.
And this connects directly to that idea of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence.
Yes, very strongly. Reactive people tend to focus their energy and thoughts on their circle of concern. Things they worry about but have little or no direct control over. Other people's weaknesses, problems in the environment, national debt, the past.
And complaining about them.
Right, which actually shrinks their power, their circle of influence, the things they can do something about. Proactive people do the opposite. They focus their time and energy squarely on their circle of influence.
Things they can control.
things they can control. Their own choices, their attitude, their skills, their commitments, how they treat others.
And even when the problem seems external, like someone else's behavior or something unchangeable like the past, the proactive approach says the first step to addressing it still lies within your circle of influence.
Absolutely. You can choose your response. You can choose to learn from it. You can choose to change your habits or methods. You can choose forgiveness. The power to act always starts with you.
And the really cool insight here is that by focusing energy in your circle of influence, you actually make it bigger over time.
That's the magic. As you work on yourself, become more skilled, build trust, keep commitments, your influence naturally expands. You gain credibility. You find you can impact things you previously thought were totally outside your control.
Like that example they gave of the executive dealing with a brilliant but really dictatorial boss.
Yeah.
A reactive person would just complain, feel victimized, maybe form a negative clique.
Right. Focusing on the boss's weaknesses, circle of concern.
But the proactive executive focused on what they could control. The quality of their own work, their presentations, anticipating problems, being a buffer for their team, finding resourceful ways to get information.
Working within their circle of influence.
And that proactive behavior, it might eventually change the dynamic with the boss, or at the very least it builds personal strength, reputation, and maybe opens up opportunities elsewhere.
Exactly. And you don't need dramatic situations to practice this. The sources suggest a 30-day test. Just focus on your circle of influence for a month. How do you handle traffic? An annoying email? A difficult colleague? It's about flexing that muscle of choice every day.
Making and keeping small commitments to yourself, building that integrity.
Building that proactive muscle, which then leads beautifully into habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
Okay, habit 2. This sounds like using that proactivity, using those endowments, imagination, conscience, to figure out where you're actually going.
Precisely. The core principle here is that all things are created twice. There's always a first creation, a mental creation, and then a second creation, a physical creation.
Like building a house. You don't just start hammering nails.
Right. You need a blueprint first. You visualize it, plan it meticulously. That's the first. Mental creation. Then you build it the second, physical creation.
And the most powerful way to apply this habit, they suggest, is to begin today with the image of the end of your life as your frame of reference.
It's a startling exercise, isn't it? To really picture your own funeral. What would you want people to say about you? What character? What contributions? What difference did you make?
Wow, yeah, that's intense.
But powerful.
It really forces you to confront what matters most deep down.
Right.
And then to use that vision as the standard, the criterion for evaluating everything else you do today. Are your daily actions, your priorities, actually moving you towards that ultimate end, or are you just busy?
Getting caught up in stuff that doesn't really align with that deep vision. This sounds like personal leadership. That's exactly what it is. Habit 1 says, you are the creator. Habit 2 is the first creation. It's leadership. It's asking the top line questions. What are the things I want to accomplish? Am I climbing the right ladder? Is this ladder leaning against the right wall?
Because management is different, right?
Yeah.
Management is climbing the ladder efficiently.
Yes. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. And the tragedy, the sources point out, is that people often get really good at management efficient, achieving goals, without ever doing the prior leadership work of making sure they're pursuing the right goals, the ones that truly resonate with their deepest values, climbing the wrong ladder very efficiently.
So habit 2 is about becoming your own first creator. Using your imagination, your conscience, to write the script for your life based on principles.
Yeah.
Instead of just letting your old habits or other people or circumstances write it for you.
And a huge part of this is what they call rescripting. Using that self-awareness from habit 1, you can examine the scripts you've been handed down by family, culture, peers.
The subconscious programming.
Exactly. And ask, do these scripts serve my ultimate purpose? Do they align with my deepest values, the end I have in mind? If not, you can proactively rewrite them. You can rescript yourself based on your own chosen principles.
Living out of your imagination, your potential, not just your memory, your past limitations.
Beautifully put. It's so easy to get caught up in the thick of thin things, just reacting to urgent demands day after day and completely burying the things that are truly important but not screaming for attention. Habit 2 forces you to lift your head up and make sure you're focused on the right wall.
And this ties directly into where you center your life, doesn't it? The sources talk about different possible centers people might have.
Yes, they explore quite a few common ones. Spouse-centered, family-centered, money-centered, work-centered, possession-centered, pleasure-centered, even friend or enemy-centered, or sometimes self-centered or church-centered in a limited way.
And the point isn't that these things are bad.
Not at all. Many are very good, very important. But the insight is that centering your life exclusively on any one of them creates a fundamentally unstable foundation. Your security is volatile. What if the spouse leaves? The money disappears. Your job changes.
Your guidance system gets skewed too, right?
Yeah.
Based on pleasing the spouse or making money or what feels good right now.
Exactly. Your wisdom becomes narrow, focused only on that center. Your power is constrained by whatever affects that center.
That example of the father who had planned a circus trip with his son.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
And then got a last-minute demand from work. His initial reaction, being maybe work-centered or approval-centered,
Right.
was to cave to the work pressure.
Right. But then, because he'd thought about his deeper values, his end in mind for his relationship with his son.
He chose the circus trip. He centered that decision on a principle, his commitment to his son, rather than the immediate pressure from work.
And that illustrates the power of being principle-centered. Principle-centered people have a different, much more stable foundation. Their security comes from knowing that principles, like fairness or integrity, don't change with circumstances.
Their guidance comes from within, right? Their
Oh.
conscience aligned with those principles.
Yes. Their wisdom takes in a much broader, longer-term perspective.
Yeah.
And their power comes from within, too, from self-awareness, imagination, conscience, independent will, all aligned with these natural laws of effectiveness. They can proactively choose their contribution.
So centering your life on timeless principles gives you that solid core, that anchor, and it puts all those other potential centers, work, family, money, into their proper perspective. They become important parts of life, but not the ultimate center dictating everything.
Exactly. It creates a stable, effective, proactive paradigm. And that principle-centered paradigm, that clear vision from habit 2, flows directly into habit 3. Put first things first.
Okay, habit 3. If habit 2 was the mental creation, deciding what's truly important, habit 3 is the physical creation, actually doing those important things.
You got it. This is effective self-management, doing things right. It's organizing and executing around the priorities you identified in habit 2, living it out day by day, week by week.
And the key here seems to be managing based on importance, not just urgency.
Absolutely critical. Urgent things demand attention now. They're usually visible. They press on us. Important things, on the other hand, contribute to our mission, our values, our high-priority goals. They require more initiative, more proactivity.
And the sources use that time management matrix to illustrate this, right? The 4 quadrants.
Yes, a very powerful tool. Quadrant third is urgent and important crises, deadlines, pressing problems. We have to spend time here.
Quadrant third is urgent but not important interruptions. Some meetings, popular activities, other people's minor issues. Looks urgent, but isn't actually important to your goals.
Right, the deception of urgency. Quadrant third is not urgent and not important trivia, busy work, time wasters, mindlessly scrolling.
We probably spend more time there than we admit.
Probably. But the key insight, the place where truly effective people focus their time and energy, is quadrant 2.
Quadrant 2. Important, but not urgent.
Exactly. This is where all the high leverage activities live. Prevention, planning, relationship building, preparation, exercise, continuous learning, identifying new opportunities, recreation that truly renews. PC activities.
But it's tough, isn't it? Quadrant 2 things don't press on you. No one is yelling at you to build a relationship or plan for the future or exercise.
Precisely. Quadrant 2 requires proactivity. It requires independent will. You have to act to spend time there. It doesn't just happen. And the sources make a crucial point. You can't really say no effectively to the urgent but not important demands of Quadrant 3 or the pleasant escapes of Quadrant 3, unless you have a bigger yes burning inside. That clear sense of purpose, mission, and values from Habit 2 gives you the perspective and the courage to prioritize the important over the merely urgent.
So effective time management isn't just about daily planning or to-do lists.
Not primarily. The most effective tools, they argue, are principle-centered. They help you organize your life on a weekly basis, connecting you to your key roles, like parent, manager, individual, and the important goals you have within those roles for the week. It gives you context and flexibility within a framework of what truly matters.
Like using a compass.
Yeah.
Your principles and direction, rather than just a clock, scheduling urgent tasks,
Yeah.
or even just a roadmap. a rigid daily plan.
Exactly. And a huge part of making Quadrant 2 possible, especially as your responsibilities grow, is delegation. Effective delegation.
Oh, delegation. Habit 3 involves that too.
Yes, it's a powerful way to increase your leverage, your PC. But there are two very different kinds. There's gopher delegation.
Go for delegation, like go for this, go for that.
Pretty much. It's where you tell someone exactly what to do and how to do it. Step-by-step instructions. Micromanagement, really.
Which is exhausting for the manager
Yeah.
and doesn't really empower the person being delegated to.
Not at all. It limits your capacity dramatically. The alternative is stewardship delegation. This focuses on results, not methods.
Stewardship, like entrusting someone with a responsibility.
Exactly. It's based on trust and a belief in the other person's capabilities. It definitely takes more time and effort up front to establish, but the long-term payoff in terms of leverage, growth for the other person, and overall effectiveness is massive.
So how does stewardship delegation work? What needs to be clear?
It requires clear, upfront, mutual understanding and commitment in 5 key areas. First, desired results. What needs to be achieved? What does success look like? Be specific.
Okay.
Second, guidelines. What are the parameters, the rules, the principles they need to operate within? Avoid telling them how, but clarify any important boundaries or potential pitfalls.
Got it. Resources.
Third, resources. What human, financial, technical, or organizational resources can they draw upon to get the job done?
Fourth, accountability. How will performance be measured? What are the standards? And when will progress be reported or reviewed?
And finally, fifth, consequences. What will happen, good and bad, as a result of the evaluation? This could be financial rewards, recognition, reassignment, or natural consequences related to the task itself.
That sounds much more empowering. The person has the what and the why, the boundaries, the support, and knows how they'll be measured, but the how is up to them.
Precisely. The story they tell about the father delegating the yard work to his young son is a perfect example.
Right. The father resisted the urge to give step-by-step instructions. The gopher method.
He focused on the desired result, green and clean. That was the standard. He identified resources, himself for training, the tools. He set up accountability, weekly inspection together. And the consequence was the son managed his own time and method, and the neighborhood kids became his employees.
And the son took ownership. He figured out the how, managed the process, and the yard looked great. It built his self-management skills, his PC, and the father was freed up.
That's the power of stewardship delegation. It's built on and it builds trust. And the sources emphasize, trust is the absolute highest form of human motivation. It brings out the very best in people.
Okay, so these 3 habits, be proactive, begin with the end in mind, and put first things first, these are the private victories. They build character, integrity, self-mastery. They move you from dependence to independence.
That's the foundation. And you absolutely need that foundation of independence before you can successfully practice the habits of interdependence, of public victories. You have to be independent to truly choose interdependence.
Makes sense. So what's the bridge to those public victories? How do we start thinking about effective relationships?
A really core concept here, maybe the most important metaphor for relationships in the whole framework, is the emotional bank account.
Emotional bank account. Okay, like a financial bank account, but for relationships.
Exactly like that. It's a metaphor for the amount of trust that's been built up in a relationship. When the account balance is high, communication is easy, instant, effective. Even if you make a mistake, there's enough goodwill, enough trust to cover it.
You have a buffer.
You have a buffer. But when the account is low or overdrawn, trust is gone. You're walking on eggshells. Every interaction is guarded, defensive. Communication becomes difficult, strained, maybe even impossible. Simple misunderstandings blow up.
So how do you make deposits into this account?
Deposits are made through things like basic courtesy, kindness, honesty, keeping promises, showing integrity, apologizing sincerely when you make a withdrawal. Little things consistently done add up.
And withdrawals.
Withdrawals are the opposites. Being unkind, disrespectful, interrupting, overreacting, ignoring someone, betraying trust, being arrogant, breaking promises.
Breaking promises sounds like a big one.
Huge. Keeping commitments is arguably the single biggest deposit you can make. Breaking a commitment, especially one that was important to the other person, is a massive withdrawal. It fundamentally shatters trust.
What are some other key deposits they highlight?
Clarifying expectations is vital. So many relationship problems, whether in marriage, with kids, or at work, stem from ambiguous or conflicting expectations about roles, goals, values, how things should be done. Taking the time up front to really discuss and align expectations is a huge deposit and prevents countless future withdrawals.
Makes sense. What else?
Showing personal integrity. Being consistent between your words and actions. Avoiding gossip or bad-mouthing people who aren't present. That builds trust with the people you are with because they know you won't do the same to them later. Loyalty to the absent is a massive deposit. Duplicity is a huge withdrawal.
And apologizing sincerely when you mess up, when you make a withdrawal.
Yes, a sincere apology, not "I'm sorry, but," or "I'm sorry if you felt bad," but a genuine acknowledgement of the mistake and the hurt caused can be a significant deposit, especially if the account balance was already decent. But if the account is chronically low, apologies might ring hollow.
Right. And the sources point out that when that bank account is low, people often resort to those personality ethic techniques again, right? Trying to manipulate or use communication tricks.
Exactly, the social aspirin. Trying to treat the symptoms because the underlying trust isn't there, which usually just makes things worse. It leads to that ineffective outside-in thinking. The problem is you, if you would just change.
Which, if both sides are doing it, leads absolutely nowhere. Stalemate.
Total paralysis. Lasting solutions in relationships almost always come from the inside out, focusing on your circle of influence, your deposits, your side of the street, building the trust balance first.
Okay, so with that emotional bank account concept firmly in mind, we can move to the first public victory habit. Habit 4, think win-win.
Right. Habit 4 isn't a technique, it's a total philosophy of human interaction. It's a frame of mind and heart that constantly seeks mutual benefit in all agreements or solutions.
Win-win. Both sides feel good about it.
Both sides feel good, and both are committed to the action plan because it serves their interests. It's based on a fundamental paradigm the sources call the abundance mentality.
Abundance mentality, as opposed to
the scarcity mentality. Scarcity sees life as a fixed pie. If someone gets a big piece, there's less for me. It fuels competition, comparison, feeling threatened by others' success.
win-lose thinking.
Win-lose, or even lose-win, being a martyr. Or lose-lose, if I'm going down, you're coming with me. Abundance mentality, on the other hand, sees that there's plenty out there for everybody. Success isn't achieved at the expense of others, but potentially with others. It opens the door to creativity and cooperation.
So win-win rejects the idea that conflict has to mean a winner and a loser.
Absolutely. It says, let's work together to find a solution that works for both of us. This requires a specific balance, though. It requires high courage and high consideration.
Courage and consideration. Explain that.
Courage is the willingness to speak up for your own needs, your own views, your own convictions. Consideration is the willingness to deeply listen to and understand the other person's needs, views, and convictions. You need both. High courage and low consideration is win-lose. High consideration and low courage is lose-win.
And low on both is probably lose-lose or just avoidance.
Right. Finding that high courage, high consideration sweet spot is where win-win solutions are born.
And a really critical part of making win-win possible is having the no-deal option available.
Yes, that's huge. If, after genuinely trying, you simply cannot find a solution that feels like a win for both parties, it's often better to agree amicably to disagree to make no deal than to force a solution that leaves one or both parties feeling bad.
Because that forced solution just makes a withdrawal from the emotional bank account.
Exactly. Having no deal as a viable option frees you from feeling pressured to manipulate or push for your way. You can genuinely focus on finding mutual benefit, knowing you can walk away if it's not there.
And this applies at an organizational level too, doesn't it? The systems have to support win-win.
Critically important. If you say you want teamwork and cooperation, but your reward systems pit people against each other in a win-lose competition, guess what you'll get?
Competition, win-lose behavior.
Right. The systems drive the behavior. The example they used of the real estate company was powerful. The manager only made money when the salespeople made money. That's a win-win system, and it fostered cooperation and support, not internal rivalry.
Aligning the rewards with the desired outcome. Okay, that makes sense for habit 4. What's next? Habit 5?
Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This one. This might be the single most powerful principle for improving interpersonal communication, bar none.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Okay, sounds simple, but probably isn't easy.
Not easy at all, because it goes against our natural inclination. The core idea is simple. Diagnose before you prescribe.
Like a doctor wouldn't give you medicine without examining you first.
Or an optometrist wouldn't just hand you their own glasses and say, "Here, try these, they work great for me." You'd want them to understand your specific prescription first, right?
Of course. That would be absurd otherwise.
Yet in communication, we do the equivalent all the time. Someone starts talking, sharing a problem or a feeling, and we're immediately jumping in with our own story, our own advice, our own judgment, based on our own experience.
We're prescribing before we've diagnosed.
Exactly. We're filtering everything through our own paradigm, our own autobiography. The sources call these autobiographical responses. We tend to evaluate, agree or disagree, probe, ask questions from our own frame of reference, advise, give counsel based on our experience, or interpret, try to figure people out based on our own motives.
And none of those really make the other person feel heard or understood, do they?
Rarely. They often shut communication down or keep it at a very superficial level because the person doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel like you're really getting it from their point of view.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative is empathic listening. Listening with the genuine intent to understand, not just listening to reply or listening to agree or disagree, but listening to truly see the world the way the other person sees it.
Getting inside their frame of reference,
Yeah.
feeling what they're feeling.
Yes. It involves listening not just to the words, but to the meaning, the feeling, the nonverbal cues. It's trying to understand both the content and the emotion behind it, then reflecting back what you're hearing, gently, to confirm your understanding. So you're feeling really frustrated because, or it sounds like you're worried about.
That father-son conversation example in the source really showed the difference. The dad kept giving good advice.
Well-intentioned advice.
Right. But it completely missed the mark because he wasn't hearing the son's underlying feelings about school and social pressure. He was prescribing based on his own map.
And the son just shut down. But when you practice empathic listening, when you truly hear someone and reflect their feeling and meaning back accurately, it's like giving them psychological air.
Psychological air. I like that.
They feel acknowledged, validated, understood. It builds massive trust, huge deposits in the emotional bank account. It allows them to often work through their own issues just by talking them out with someone who truly listens without judgment or advice giving.
And once they feel truly understood, then they might be open to hearing your perspective or advice.
Exactly. Once you've made the effort to understand them, seek first to understand, they become far more open to understanding you than to be understood. You've made the deposit, built the trust. Now you can present your ideas logically, maybe even challenge their perspective respectfully because they know you get where they're coming from. You're side by side looking at the problem, not face-to-face arguing.
It transforms the conversation.
Completely, from transactional to potentially transformational. But the sources stress. This isn't just about technique. You can learn the skills of reflecting, but if your motive, your desire to understand, isn't genuine, people will feel it. It'll come across as manipulative, especially with people close to you. Sincerity is key.
It reminds me of that old Greek model for persuasion. Ethos, pathos, logos.
Perfect parallel. Ethos is your credibility, your character, your trustworthiness. That's the foundation, right? Your private victories, your emotional bank account balance.
Right.
Pathos is the feeling, the empathic side, aligning with the other person's emotions, showing you understand their perspective. That's seek first to understand.
And only then comes logos, the logic, the reason, your proposal, your advice.
Exactly. You need the ethos and the pathos before the logos will land effectively. Habit 5 is incredibly powerful because seeking to understand is always within your circle of influence. You can always choose to listen empathically regardless of how the other person is behaving.
And doing so builds the trust and gets you the accurate information needed for the next habit.
Yeah.
Habit 6, synergize.
Yes. Synergy. This is the habit of creative cooperation. It's where the whole truly becomes greater than the sum of its parts. 1 + 1 = 3 or 10 or 100.
Creative cooperation. How does that work? What makes it happen?
Synergy happens when you genuinely value differences. When you see different perspectives, different opinions, different strengths, not as threats or obstacles, but as opportunities. Remember the young woman Olben picture.
Both views were based on the same data, just perceived differently.
Exactly. Synergy says, okay, you see it differently than I do. That's fantastic. Help me understand your perspective because maybe together, seeing both views, we can understand the whole picture much better and maybe even find a solution neither of us saw initially.
So it's about leveraging those differences to find better answers, third alternatives that weren't on the table before.
That's the essence of it. Synergistic communication requires opening your mind and heart to new possibilities, being willing to let go of your initial position in the belief that something better can emerge from the interaction.
This sounds like it needs a pretty high level of trust and security.
Absolutely. It builds directly on the previous habits. You need a high emotional bank account. Habit 4 deposits, beat through understanding and integrity. You need to be thinking win-win. Habit 4, believing a mutually beneficial solution exists. And you absolutely need to seek first to understand. Habit 5, to get all the perspectives accurately on the table. Those create the fertile ground where synergy can blossom.
Can you give an example?
The source talks about a classroom situation where the professor and students, through really open, trusting dialogue about what wasn't working, co-created a completely new structure for the class, grading, assignments, everything. It was far better than the professor's original plan or just student complaints. It was a synergistic third alternative.
So it emerged from valuing everyone's input and looking for something better together.
Right. And synergy isn't always neat or predictable. The sources acknowledge the process can sometimes feel a bit ambiguous or even chaotic as different ideas clash and combine. But if the trust is there and the commitment to win-win understanding is maintained, the breakthroughs are often remarkable.
Like that example of the husband and wife planning a family vacation.
Yeah.
He wanted fishing for the boys. She wanted time with her ailing mother nearby. Seems like a conflict.
A classic potential win-lose. But if they seek first to understand the why behind each position, he values the bonding experience, she values honoring family connection, and maybe the investment already made, PC, and they think win-win, they can synergize. Maybe they find a location near the mother with great fishing. Maybe they adjust the timing. Maybe they find creative ways to achieve both goals differently. The solution is better because it honors both sets of values.
Valuing the differences leads to better solutions. And synergy isn't just between people, is it? It can be internal too.
Yes. Valuing differences helps us integrate the different parts of ourselves, our logical left brain, with our intuitive, creative right brain. By appreciating diverse perspectives in others, we often become better at accessing and valuing the different parts of our own thinking. It helps us overcome our own limited maps.
Okay, so private victories build independence. Public victories build effective interdependence through trust, mutual benefit, understanding, and synergy. What's left? Habit 7.
Habit 7, sharpen the saw. This is the habit that makes all the others possible. It's the habit of personal renewal, of maintaining and enhancing the greatest asset you have, which is you. It's personal PC production capability.
Sharpening the saw. Like the woodcutter who's too busy cutting to sharpen his saw, becomes less and less effective.
Exactly that parable. Habit 7 is about taking time regularly to renew yourself in the 4 fundamental dimensions of life: physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional.
The 4 dimensions. Okay, let's break those down. Physical.
Caring for your physical body, eating well, getting enough rest, managing stress, and consistent exercise that builds endurance, flexibility, and strength. The sources make a great point that much of the benefit, the real PC building, often comes right at the end of the exertion when you push through resistance.
And choosing to exercise, even when you don't feel like it, connects back to habit 1, right? Proactivity.
Absolutely. You're acting based on the value of health, not just the feeling of comfort. It builds self-mastery, self-esteem, that independent will every time you do it.
Okay. Spiritual dimension.
This provides leadership to your life. It's connecting with your core, your center, your value system. Renewing your commitment to those principles. It's highly related to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. For different people, this might involve prayer, meditation, reading scripture, or inspiring literature, spending time in nature, listening to uplifting music.
Finding that source of meaning and perspective beyond the day-to-day grind, like that story of the doctor prescribing time alone in nature to reconnect.
Yes, reflecting on life, values, purpose. That deep renewal clarifies your why.
Mental dimension.
This is about continually educating yourself, expanding your mind, reading good literature, keeping a journal, writing, planning, visualizing, learning new skills. The sources really contrast this with mind-numbing passive activities like excessive TV watching. It requires a conscious choice. Habit 3, put first things first, to use time to inform and expand your mind, not just vegetate.
And sharpening the mental saw also involves honing that first creation skill through planning and visualizing from habit 2.
Exactly. And finally, the social-emotional dimension.
How do you move that?
This dimension is renewed primarily through our relationships, through connection, empathy, contribution, and service. It ties directly into the public victory habits, thinking win-win, seeking to understand, synergizing. Making deposits in others' emotional bank accounts actually renews us, too.
There's a security in contribution, isn't there? In making a difference beyond yourself.
A deep satisfaction. The sources cite people like Viktor Frankl and Hans Selye on the fundamental human need for meaning and purpose, which often comes through contribution. Engaging in meaningful service, even anonymous service where the motive is purely to lift others, is profoundly renewing.
And part of renewing this dimension is also about how we see others.
Yes, actively scripting others positively, seeing their potential, believing in their proactive nature, reflecting back their worth and capability, operating from that abundance mentality, that strengthens our own social-emotional core.
And the key is balance.
Yeah.
Renewing all 4 dimensions.
Crucial. Neglecting any one area will negatively impact the others over time. If you're physically exhausted, it's hard to be patient, social-emotional, or think clearly, mental. If you lose touch with your values, spiritual, your daily choices, mental, physical, might lack direction. They're all interconnected.
So habit 7 isn't just one more thing to do. It's the investment that makes everything else you do more effective and sustainable.
It's the quadrant 2 activity that enhances your capacity to handle everything in quadrants 1, 2, and 3 more effectively. The sources strongly recommend carving out time for a daily private victory, maybe an hour each day, ideally dedicated specifically to renewing the physical, spiritual, and mental dimensions. It's totally within your circle of influence and builds that foundational strength.
Wow. Okay. So stepping back, these 7 habits, they really form a complete framework, don't they? From internal character to external effectiveness.
They do.
Yeah.
And they're all about aligning your life, your paradigms, your actions with those fundamental principles of effectiveness we talked about at the start. They're presented as natural laws. Live in harmony with them, you get positive results. Ignore or violate them, you get negative consequences. It's predictable.
It's that inside-out approach again. Build the character, win the private victories, habits 1, 2, 3, based on principle.
Right, that independence, that self-mastery.
And then you can effectively engage in the public victories, habits 4, 5, 6, of interdependence. Win-win, understanding, synergy.
Built on trust, the emotional bank account.
And all of it sustained by continuous renewal. Habit 7.
It's not a quick fix, definitely not the personality ethic. Well, it's like the farm.
Exactly like the farm. You have to prepare the soil, plant, cultivate, weed. You reap what you sow. It's a natural process. And true effectiveness, that sustainable success, always comes back to that PPC balance, getting the golden eggs while taking care of the goose. Your finances, your health, your relationships, your work. So we've really taken a deep dive today into these core ideas, focusing on character over image, understanding our paradigms, our maps, moving from dependence through independence to interdependence.
We walk through being proactive, starting with a clear picture of your destination, managing priorities based on importance, aiming for mutual benefit, truly listening first, valuing differences to create better outcomes.
And remembering to continuously renew ourselves across those 4 key areas: physical, spiritual, mental, and social-emotional.
Yeah, these principles, they really do seem to govern human effectiveness. They're like laws of nature. Aligning with them tends to bring positive results, predictable consequences. Ignoring them, well, that brings negative ones. It truly is an inside-out journey. Character first, private victories before public ones.
Not a quick fix at all. It's that farming process. You get out what you put in consistently over time, balancing the production with the ability to produce. That PPC balance is everywhere when you look for it.
It really is, whether it's your money, your marriage, or your team at work.
So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, maybe consider that idea from Viktor Frankl one more time. Between stimulus and response, there is a space.
A space where we have the freedom to choose. And in that space lies our growth, our happiness, driven by our self-awareness, our imagination, our conscience, our independent will.
How can you consciously use that space today? Maybe apply just one of these principles, even in a small interaction, to move a tiny step closer towards the life you truly envision. A life centered on principles that genuinely matter to you.
It's definitely a continuous journey, isn't it? A path of growth. And the first step always begins right inside your own circle of influence.